The Power of Story-Based Instruction by Candice Bowes. Hello, I'm Candice Bowes. I have a bachelor's degree in elementary education. I've taught in public, private, and online schools, and I have a master's degree in instructional design. But I became an author because I came to understand the amazing power of story-based instruction. Many years ago, I was teaching second grade. In math, we came to the unit about rounding numbers to the nearest 10. We had talked about place value, and we had talked about what a 10 is and what a 1 is, and I had explained repeatedly about how rounding works. And Emma just sat there, staring at me. She wasn't grasping this concept at all. Then a flash of inspiration hit me. Explain this concept by telling a story. So I did. Emma's face lit up. Her eyes got that sparkle of understanding. She finally got it. Since the dawn of time, stories have been used to teach. Here are some that we're probably quite familiar with. What does the story of Pinocchio teach us? It teaches us to tell the truth. It teaches us that choices have consequences. And it teaches us that it's never too late to do the right thing. How about Little Red Riding Hood? From this story we learn to be careful of strangers, don't disobey our parents, and appearances can be deceiving. Remember Beauty and the Beast? From this story we learn not to judge someone based on their appearance. We learn that love triumphs over hate, and we learn to fight for what you believe in. There are many other stories that teach us. Aesop's fables are full of life lessons. Remember the tortoise and the hare? The boy who cried wolf? Or how about the ant and the grasshopper? These stories teach many valuable life lessons, and they make them memorable. These stories stick with us, as do the lessons they teach. Storytelling is an art form that goes back millennia. People from all cultures and walks of life have used storytelling to teach, influence, and inspire, convey culture, history, and values of society, and unite families, communities, and countries. Stories can foster compassion, admiration, understanding, and respect, even across cultural differences. Using stories to pass down history, moral laws, and survival skills is one of humanity's oldest and most universal practices. Long before writing systems were invented, cultures across the globe relied on oral traditions to keep their heritage alive. We see this in the stories from ancient Greece, the griots of Africa, and the Vikings of Northern Europe. In Native American cultures, tribal elders were, and continue to be, deeply revered, serving as the living archives of their communities. It is their role to teach tribal history, ecological knowledge, societal morals, and more, and they do this through storytelling. In fact, to them, storytelling was not a casual pastime or mere entertainment. It was a sacred pedagogical tool used to pass down the tribe's worldview. Elders were the only ones entrusted with these stories because they possessed the nuance, language, and spiritual maturity to tell them correctly. Storytelling is effective for all ages because it taps into universal human experiences and emotions. It allows people of all backgrounds and maturity levels to connect with the narrative, learn from the characters, and feel a sense of shared understanding. Stories can connect everyone. Think about it. What's one thing that concerts, theaters, and sporting events all have in common? They all have stories to tell. People pay money to hear stories. The best stand-up comics share stories that we can relate to and with which we can connect. We seek these connections and we enjoy making them. So why aren't we as educators using stories more often? Teaching academic topics the traditional way? All too often, educators default to the sage on the stage approach, featuring dry recitation, instruction in a vacuum, and detached memorization. This approach often results in fewer connections, lower levels of engagement, and decreased mastery of content for learners. I'm sure if you stop to think about it for just a moment, you'll remember feeling disengaged and walking away from a boring lecture, not really remembering anything that was said. On the other hand, teaching academic topics using stories, where you and your learners get to connect with engaging characters who face challenges, make mistakes, ask questions, and achieve triumphs? Wow, how powerful is that? Story-based instruction boosts connections, enhances understanding, and increases retention. In fact, when it comes to making information stick, cognitive science and educational research are clear. The human brain is fundamentally wired for narrative. Studies across psychology, neuroscience, and pedagogy consistently show that embedding content within a story structure drastically increases both short-term comprehension and long-term memory retention compared to traditional expository teaching. In her article, What Makes Storytelling So Effective for Learning, Vanessa Boris explains that stories build familiarity and trust, can contain multiple meanings, allow the listener to enter the story at whatever level they are, they're more engaging than dry recitation, and they create a sense of connection. In Lead with a Story, Paul Smith states that 40% of learners are visual learners. They need to see it happening. 40% are auditory learners. They learn best by hearing things. And 20% are kinesthetic learners. They learn best by doing and feeling. And what's really amazing is that storytelling has aspects that work for all three types. Visual learners appreciate the mental pictures storytelling evokes. Auditory learners focus on the words and the storyteller's voice. And kinesthetic learners remember the emotional connections and feelings from the story. So how can educators use stories to teach? A few ideas include read-alouds, shared reading, partner reading, independent reading, using stories to introduce new topics, pleasure reading, and using stories as a cushion activity. Let's look at one example. Let's say that you are a third grade teacher and you want to teach the sevens times table. You could write the facts out on a board or screen. You could even make flashcards or distribute a mountain of random worksheets. But we all know that attempting to memorize facts in isolation and without context is a weak strategy at best. Stories don't have to be elaborate or highly dramatic to be effective. Something very simple can work quite well. Let's start with a 3x3 box and a story and see how much more effective it can be in teaching the times sevens multiplication facts. Backwards Bob and Repeater Rob decided to build an apartment building. When it was finished, they set about assigning numbers to each apartment. They divided up the task. Backwards Bob started at the far right apartment on the top floor and began numbering like this. Not to be outdone, Repeater Rob started at the far left side of the top floor and began numbering too, but with his habit of repeating himself, he started each row by repeating the previous number, like this. When they were finished, the apartment numbers looked absolutely crazy. Who would ever number apartments like this? None of it made any sense until they revealed the name of their new apartment building, the Heavenly Sevens Apartments. Now, students can think of this story, recreate the boxes, and have a handy reference tool to help them learn the times sevens facts. Why? Because the story helps them remember, and the visual and kinetic experience of drawing the boxes and writing the numbers have forged multiple pathways to the brain. What's more, they'll have a cool trick to show their friends at lunch. Here are some other reasons storytelling is so effective for learning. They're easy to remember. They create risk-free learning. They increase learner engagement. They strengthen listening skills and students' ability to focus. They teach vocabulary and grammar. They model problem solving. They can teach cause and effect, and they can show the relationship between choices and consequences. Storytelling has been scientifically proven time and again to activate parts of the brain that don't get activated through processing information alone. Just look at the difference between these diagrams. When dry data is presented, only two areas are activated. But with story-based instruction, multiple areas of the brain light up. This results in long-term potentiation or persistent strengthening of synapses. In other words, when neurons fire together, they wire together. The connection between them strengthens, learning occurs, and retention increases. And speaking of retention, psychologist Jerome Bruner's research suggests that facts are 20 times more likely to be remembered if they're part of a story. The difference is amazing. Check this out. People can remember 5 to 10% of plain facts, but put it in story form, and up to 65 to 70% of information is remembered. Finally, I love this quote from Peg Newhouser, an organizational psychologist. She says, learning, which stems from a well-told story, is remembered more accurately and for far longer than learning derived from facts and figures. So how can educators integrate storytelling into their classrooms? Number one, share your own experiences with your students. Introduce a new topic through a story. Use a story to explain a concept. Conduct interactive stories. Allow students to be storytellers and authors. Have students write alternate endings to stories. Create and use wordless books. And use props, puppets, and costumes. Such activities will bring your instruction to life and are a lot more fun than read the chapter and answer the questions. Here are some tips for supporting story-based instruction with all your learners. Pre-teach key vocabulary. Use lots of visual cues, pictures, illustrations, props, and the like. Use vocal variations like character voices and louder or softer volumes. Pause periodically to check for understanding. Use repeated or shared readings of the same text. Use sentence starters and writing prompts to invite responses, and invite retelling, sequencing, role-playing, discussion, and adaptation. These things not only make teaching and learning more fun, student mastery of content will soar. As much as I've always believed in the power of story-based instruction, I wasn't always able to use it as much as I wanted to. I would visit libraries looking for resources to teach my students about all the various topics we would cover, but there was a problem. I could find books all day long that explained about science and social studies topics, but I couldn't find anything that would teach about fractions, punctuation, proofreading, rounding numbers, or any topic related to math or language arts. And that is how Start with a Story began. I now write the very books I wish I had had when I was in the classroom. My stories teach about a wide variety of math topics, literacy concepts, and even a few life skills in ways that leverage the power of story-based instruction to make explanations of these subjects engaging, easy to understand, and memorable. Remember Emma, my student who had trouble understanding how to round numbers? Well, this story is the outgrowth of that experience. In this book, Joey learns how to round numbers, not by lecture, but from a friendly snow troll. I also remember teaching parts of speech, another potentially dry topic, and when I tried it the traditional way, my students were yawning within minutes. So I wrote The Grammar Guardians, which teaches it using superheroes. These characters make parts of speech fun, cool, exciting, and very interesting. I also write about teaching important life skills, like not bullying others. But just telling kids not to bully others doesn't always work. That's why I wrote David and the Hummingbirds. In this story, David, who has been a bully to others, learns the value of showing kindness and respect, thus earning him more friends and greater peace within himself. Each of my books includes reproducible practice pages and lists of ideas for hands-on practice you can use in the classroom or at home to enhance your instruction. I include which Common Core standards are met by the content of my books, and since I live in Virginia, I've made sure they are all SOL aligned as well. Here are just some of the math topics I've written stories for: rounding numbers, number models, comparing numbers, patterns, telling time, counting money, addition facts, multiplication facts, and more are on the way. I've addressed these literacy concepts in story form too: proper nouns, handwriting, sight words, proofreading marks, homophones, parts of speech, and more. Lastly, my life skills stories really set the stage for meaningful conversations about important topics children face today. There's my anti-bullying book, as well as books on sibling rivalry, choices and consequences, table manners, getting dressed, and speaking with respect. They're all available on Amazon. Just type in my name, Candice Bowes, spelled with an I, and you'll find everything there. If you have any questions or ideas for additional books, comment below or just email me. My address is candice@startwithastory.net. I'm Candice Bowes. Thank you for watching.